Hello everybody and welcome back. Now time for our next session, which is let's hear from the front line. What do schools and colleges need from employers right now? I'm particularly interested in this session because we've just been discussing my old school, because some panelists have links to my old school back in Somerset, so a bit of a trip down memory lane. Just a quick reminder before we get the session going about how the session works. We've got a Q&A box which you'll see on the platform. Please, as the speakers and the panel go through what they have to say, please pop your questions into there, and then I'll come back on towards the end of the session and then just moderate those questions and put them to our panelists. So all that's left for me to do is to hand over to Steph Warren, who's head of early careers at MKF, and Steph is going to lead us through this session. Over to you, Steph.
Thanks so much, and welcome to the session. As Steve just mentioned, this is all about hearing from the front line. So we're really pleased to be joined today by two fantastic careers leaders. And we really want this session to be a chance for us and for you to hear directly from those people who are on the ground doing the work that we're all interested in around careers education. And really, they're the gatekeepers to the students that we want to engage and inspire. So we're really looking forward to hearing what they have to say about how do employers best engage with schools and colleges. So just a quick look at the agenda for the session. It's going to be focused around four main questions. And we're going to be firstly looking at the most effective ways in which yourselves as employers can build their apprentice pipelines in 2021. We're going to be looking at what makes virtual activity engaging for both students and teachers, which is really important, and how you can successfully engage virtually with schools during this time. And then one of the important questions that we're looking at the end is actually what are the differences between engaging with a school and engaging with a college? So something you might not have thought too much about, but actually there are a few variances in terms of how best to engage with students at those two different institutions. So that's the discussion, focusing around those four main points. As Steve mentioned, I'm Steph, so I'm head of early careers at MyKindaFuture. And my role is to make sure that the work we do with young people is really engaging, but also meets the aims of what our clients are looking for in terms of creating a talent pipeline, inspiring young people, and furthering their knowledge of the sector that our clients work in. And as I mentioned, I'm joined by two career leads, so I'm going to hand over to Claire to introduce herself.
Hi everybody, my name is Claire Lewis. I'm Head of Careers or Careers Leader at Bridgewater and Taunton College Trust. We are a multi-academy and we cover 4 secondary schools, one of which in an economic opportunity area, 1 an agricultural state boarding schools, all quite varied, a middle school and 2 primary schools, and one of our senior schools also includes a nursery and primary, so really varied age group. And my role is to support the careers leaders at each of those schools with their careers programs and making sure that we comply with Gatsby benchmarks, statutory requirements, but also really pushing for innovation and links with employers such as yourselves. Over to Jodie.
Hi, so my name's Jodie Silman. I'm Careers Advisor at Priory School, which is part of the Priory Learning Trust, which has, again, similar to Claire, various different schools, some primaries, some nurseries. I tend to focus on the secondary schools. So I work for Priory Community School. We also have King Alfred School Academy in our trust and Worrell School Academy as well. So I've been in careers for around about 8 years. Previous to here, I used to work for Western College. So I've kind of got a little bit of an insight from a school and college perspective, but in more recent times, in light of COVID, more kind of school perspective really, that hopefully I can share with you.
Fantastic, thanks both for those introductions. So we're going to go straight into the first question, first discussion point. So this is all about how can employers engage with schools and colleges to create their 2021 pipeline. So we're looking at the pipeline for next year. And I'm going to kick off by taking this question first. And I think for us at MyKindaFuture, we know that all the employers that we work with are under immense pressures to engage with a more diverse talent pipeline, and getting the right students into the right jobs and the right vacancies. So you have really strong objectives in terms of D&I and talent pipeline. And you know, our role is to make sure that the more that those aims are aligned with schools, the more successful these activities are going to be. So looking at the aims of that you as employers have and the aims that schools have, and aligning them together will create a really successful pipeline, but really successful activity for the students. That's what we hope we're going to talk about today. You're going to hear from Claire and Jodie about what those aims and objectives for schools are, and hopefully then we'll get a better picture of how we can align them more together. So aligning those objectives really is the best way for us to engage with these students and to engage with career leaders. And ultimately, the message is that schools want to engage. Schools are always looking for these opportunities from employers for their students. And I think today we're going to really hear from Claire and Jodie that the career leaders that are on the ground are really dedicated, they're really passionate about creating these opportunities for their students, but ultimately they really care about the futures of their students and making sure that they're set up for the best possible futures. And part of that, a big part of that, is engagement now with you as employers. So we know there are many obstacles and challenges within schools, especially now, and that's definitely, you know, something we're working with and seeing at MyKindaFuture. But the aim of today, and ultimately at MyKindaFuture, is to help schools and employers align their objectives. Therefore, everyone wins, but especially the young people and the students. Our ultimate aim is to give them more knowledge, increase their inspiration and their aspirations to make sure that they're going into these roles that are the right roles for them. And some of the other things that I just wanted to talk through before I invite Claire and Jodie is this idea of making it a meaningful engagement. So that's something that if you have engaged with schools before, you're likely to hear a lot about creating a meaningful engagement. And as we talk through these discussion points today, I hope that you'll get a better idea of what Jodie, Claire and schools really class as meaningful. But that will be something that comes up time and time again. So how can you engage with schools and colleges? It's make it meaningful, and hopefully you'll have a better idea of what meaningful means by the end of this session. Another way that we think you can engage really successfully to create that talent pipeline is being really open-minded in terms of the students that you're wanting to engage with, but ultimately to really utilize the knowledge and skills of the career leaders in the schools that you're working with. They will know their students really well in terms of their aspirations and what they're capable of. So use their knowledge and use that knowledge of their students to really help you create the best pipeline you can. You'll also hear throughout this discussion a lot about timing, both in terms of what year group to engage with and when, but also across the academic year, when is the best point to engage with particular year groups. And there are some points that are a no-go for certain year groups because of exams, because of study leave. So being really aware of timing, and that really getting the timing of your activity right is key to making it successful, and therefore key to getting your talent pipeline that you need. And as MyKindaFuture, we're an intermediary between employers and our clients and the schools. So we have that network of school relationships that will enable that better relationship to be built between schools and employers to ensure that that talent pipeline is developed really well. And then ultimately, it's being certain of why you're wanting to engage. We all know that creating a more diverse talent pipeline is key to success, but really knowing why that activity, why then, why that year group, and like I said, that's something at MyKindaFuture we do a lot of, that we can support you with. But that's really important as we go through this discussion, understanding the why of your activity. Ultimately, knowing that will really help you when you engage with career leaders like Claire and Jodie. And just before I open it up to Claire and Jodie, we did a few polls within our own school networks of a few key points that we think employers are interested in right now. So we have a plethora of different ways in which we can engage students virtually right now, and there's a few of them listed here. Pre-recorded videos, you can see, came out as the one that was most coveted by career leaders. We had virtual workshops, virtual insight days, and you can see the percentages that prefer those sort of decrease. Thinking about year 13s, who for this academic year are the students that are going to create your talent pipeline, there are still a high majority of year 13s who are unsure of what they want to do next year. That talent pool is there for you to harness as an employer, and they're there for you to engage with. And we need to do it now for this academic year, because those students, they're not sure what they're going to do, and we need employers to kind of help them and guide them and work with them. And finally, there is this idea of virtual exhaustion that we're hearing quite a lot about when we're working with schools. And what else can employers do that isn't just virtual? You know, we talk a lot about virtual engagement, and there will be some ideas as well as we talk about what can we do aside from engaging with a student on a Zoom. But I'm just going to quickly ask Claire and Jodie if there's anything from what I've just said that you wanted to comment on.
Yeah, obviously completely agree, Steph, with everything you said. I think the key message from schools, and I think Jodie would reiterate this, is that we are as keen to hear from sole traders and small entrepreneurial businesses as we are from large-scale multi-million-pound companies. And actually, liaison engagement with smaller employers is often more tangible for our pupils. And also, you mentioned, obviously, you've got the statistics there about the kind of year 13 being unsure. We're seeing a huge amount of media targeting year 11, in particular, year 12 and year 13. So I think for employers, you really need to start thinking for other age groups, don't overlook the 11 to 16, the younger age groups, because actually those year 13 who are disillusioned and don't know where they're going, actually they needed input more in year 9 when they were making their options. So early intervention, I know we'll cover slightly later, but yeah, think younger and always think small. If you're a small business, we want to hear from you. Jodie, I don't know if you've got anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree in terms of, you know, all businesses, all shapes and sizes, especially for some students that perhaps don't want to travel up to Bristol to do an apprenticeship, things like that. They want to stay more local, and there's so many fantastic opportunities. But one of the things I would say, Steph mentioned briefly about using them as kind of like an intermediary, but I'm thinking about the National Apprenticeships website, and actually as careers leaders and careers advisors, we always signpost to that. So whatever vacancies you've got, absolutely get in touch with us on a personal level, because we may just have that one student in mind that we spoke to last week that's completely interested in exactly what you have to offer, but to keep the impartiality and to make sure that there's a fairness for you guys, so that you've got the whole talent pool there that could be applying. Please make sure that you advertise everything on the National Apprenticeships website, on the government website, so that we can signpost to that as kind of like an equal platform for all students to get involved with. The other thing that I really want to echo, as Claire said, is, you know, getting involved with younger year groups. It's the long game, but it reaps the benefits later on. They really do benefit, and they're so much more up for doing stuff. They're so much more engaged with it. It's not a lesson, it's fun, it's something different. So that you build this kind of relationship with them. You're tapping into that talent pool much younger. So by the time they come to year 11, 12, 13, they've got some ideas, they've engaged with employers, it's not all new to them. And they're really kind of up for doing some more things to get the best out of them. So absolutely go for the younger years as well.
Perfect, thank you. And I've just seen a question that's popped up around these figures. So these questions were asked to a group of career leads. So these are the preferences and opinions of career leads. So they're saying that 33% of the career leads that we spoke to would prefer pre-recorded videos. So I hope that answers that question. So on to our second question. So to Claire and Jodie then, what elements make virtual activities engaging, for students, and enticing for teachers and career leaders such as yourself. So Jodie, over to you on that one first.
Okay, so yeah, in terms of making them enticing for teachers, they need to be short and sweet. They need to be easy to access. I mean, I'm not a teacher, I'm a careers advisor, and so I'm handing stuff over to teachers going, do this, it's amazing, but they want to know how long it's going to take out of their curriculum, because they've missed an awful lot of delivery time over the lockdown, so it's really not the best time for me to keep giving them stuff. So anything that's easy for them in terms of accessing it and delivering it is the best possible route. So as those polls showed, the pre-recorded videos are excellent, because I can send them to them and they can use them when they've got 10 minutes or in tutor time or whenever they feel they can use them, rather than me trying to arrange a mutually convenient time for an employer to zoom into an actual live class. So things like that, ease of access, removing any barriers. So things like when you have to log in and you have to sign up. Our students, for example, they've all got student email addresses, but there's a spam filter on that often, if you've got to click a link to verify your email address, they don't get the link come through and things like that. So anything you can do to make it as easy as possible for both the staff and for the students, I think is going to make it more enticing to take part in. If it looks like it's going to be a lot of work, then it's going to be at the bottom of the to-do list, I think. I would say in terms of meaningful engagement, the best thing that you can do is to really take on board feedback from school staff, from students that you've done things with before. It is a lot of trial and error, and we're all doing it. We're all trial and erroring this new virtual world, and some things work and some things don't. But I think it's taking the good things and making them really positive and really impactful. The students, they need to understand the point in what they're doing. So they need to see why what they're doing is directly related to that maths lesson that they just had, or that English lesson, the skills they can gain from what it is that you're trying to get them to do. So I would say those are probably the key things. Would you have anything to add, Claire?
Yeah, Jodie, yeah, obviously completely agree, which is good because we're doing the same job. But the hook is key. They have to see the value in it. I would say never underestimate the power of reward, be it food, but you can't because it's virtual. But for example, if you've got a pupil engaged with a program with you, what is the outcome? What's the reward? Does a winner of a competition get to spend a day shadowing the director? Where does it lead to? I'd also say don't dismiss the smaller level engagement. So we, again, very common to find a year 9 workshop or virtual program with a particular year group, but actually we've found quite successful virtual engagements with small focused targeted groups that actually cross the school. So perhaps 5 or 6 students in year 7, 8, 9. And actually there's students love that. They've been picked, they've been selected to attend whatever it is. And also it's appropriate, so it means that those pupils actually have a specific interest in STEM or whatever the subject is. So actually as an employer, if they're kind of handpicked and it's relevant to you, then they're more likely to engage with you on leaving. And I think the final message, which again I think Jodie would agree with, is schools want to hear from you, but they want to know that it's not just a one-off. So please, really consider your longer term investment. Where is this going? We're really keen to have long-term relationships with businesses, to have stable and sustainable partnerships. And I think that's key. And pupils therefore are more likely to engage in the future because they're familiar with who you are and what you offer.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. And one of the other things, when I was speaking to my colleague about this before we came online, was that we're thinking, schools love to hear from businesses, but because of this kind of overload thing, for example, pre-COVID, we'd have a careers convention, we'd invite you all into the hall and it would be the same evening and we'd have 30, 40 employers, colleges, universities here. What we want to try and kind of replicate is that on a virtual level. So what I'm saying is that if you can find some way of grouping together as employers to approach schools, it's something that we can offer as a whole, rather than you putting a lot of time and effort into delivering, planning something really fantastic only to approach schools and they've already done it with another employer. Whereas if you if you can kind of group together, perhaps through the Careers and Enterprise Company, or or through things like this, then it might be that your time is used more wisely, and it means that we can say yes to a lot more things, rather than kind of little bitty things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, Jodie. Thank you. And I think it wouldn't be a session talking about careers ed in schools if we didn't mention the Gatsby benchmark. So it kind of goes without saying for us who work in this day to day, but to make these virtual activities enticing for teachers and career leads, they need to align with those Gatsby benchmarks. And we won't go into any more detail about those here, but if you did want to find out more about them, we'll have our emails at the end. But thanks so much for that one. So on to the third question. It's about a really pertinent question for the times that we find ourselves in. How can employers navigate this virtual world? What looked good digitally? What do students need, and when's the best time to engage? Claire, over to you on that one.
We could write huge lists on this, couldn't we? So I think the key word, flexibility. I'm really pleased to see that poll that you did, that the majority of careers leaders were saying pre-recorded, but hopefully with a follow-on. But that pre-recording gives schools the opportunity to have ownership, to deliver it where it's easy for them. But certainly having a follow activity so that pupils are really engaging with SLT, so senior managers definitely report that things like virtual assemblies where you can be beamed in across different tutor groups or different bubbles is really popular at the moment, because they're busy, they don't have time to do assemblies, and actually it's a 15-minute at the start of the day that's actually free. Dare I use that word free? It's not really free, but it's available. Whereas unfortunately we talk about timing, I'd say currently the pressure on year 11 is huge, and that there really isn't a huge amount of time. But again, with the younger year groups, with year 9 and year 10 in particular, you can get whole year group access through virtual assemblies or working within bubbles. And I think for me, the key part of looking good digitally is, please don't forget that students have had quite a shift in their curriculum and their timetable, and they're very sedentary now. They're often in one place, they're not moving around the school campus because of their bubbles. So if you can change their diet and make it as interactive as possible and not just sitting at a computer for the whole time, then that really does go down well. Jodie, I think you'd probably say change their diet.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good analogy. I think it's really important as well to, I'm not sure about your schools, Claire, but to remember that not all students have access to IT at the same time. So whatever you do during the school day, or whatever it may be, to have those recorded versions of it that they're able to access later on from home is really, really important, because actually we haven't got enough computers to have every single student at a computer for the whole hour or whatever. It might be that they'd have to rotate, and as you said, with things like bubbles now and having to sit in the same places, these things just aren't possible at the moment. So being as accessible as possible is really, really important, making sure that everything is available for later on, and all those kinds of things, I think, kind of are going to get the best uptake from students, and it means that we can then signpost it to parents as well and say, hey, this is what they were doing in school today. If they didn't get a chance to have a look, please do log on tonight, and we can send links home and all sorts of things. So yeah, I definitely agree. Making things a little bit more fun and a little bit more interesting would be great.
And I think a certificate of completion at the end always goes down well. So again, when we talk about what's the purpose, if they've got something they can put in their record of achievement at the end of the year that says, I spent X number of hours completing this course, then that's something that they can add to their CV as they start to develop them in the later years.
Definitely. I know we talked about the pre-recorded videos, and one of the things that concerned me when I started first thinking about them in September was that they're maybe not as personalised as zooming in directly to a class, but actually Bridgewater College, Claire, have done kind of landing pages for each individual school, and there still are ways of making it personal. It might take a few different recordings just to say hi Priory students or whatever at the beginning, different schools to different things at the beginning, but I think that personal touch really does make a difference as well, because those students feel like you're talking to them as opposed to just delivering something. I would
Yeah.
say. And sorry.
Sorry, Jodie or Claire, do go ahead.
It was me. I was just thinking in terms of the best times to engage. I'm thinking particularly about virtual work experience in year 10, because actually, like we saw in the poll, a lot of students don't know what they want to do now, and I think that's only going to become more of an issue because they've missed things like year 10 work experience week, they've missed college taster days, all the things that we can normally do to help them kind of develop their interests and to explore career ideas. And actually what's really important for us now as a school is thinking about virtual work experience and how we can make that work. And I think for you guys as employers that are listening, to have a think about how you could possibly support the students with that. One would give you a great insight into the sort of students that are interested in your career roles that could potentially turn into apprentices later on. But two, would just really, really help a lot of young people gain some real life experience and insight into the world of work in whatever industry that may be.
Yeah, and virtual work experience is something that we're looking at as an organisation. We've delivered some fantastic virtual work experience weeks already, and we use our platform connector to deliver that. So if anyone is interested in looking at a virtual work experience offer, do get in touch with us about connector. And the last question is about the difference between schools and colleges, and it's not always that obvious about what these differences are, but actually there's quite a lot of differences that have connotations for how to engage and how to be successful in that engagement. So we've only got a few minutes for this, but Claire and Jodie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you feel the differences in this are.
Yeah, I mean, so our sponsor is Bridgewater and Taunton College, and I mean, again, the key word is flexibility. So schools quite constrained by timetables and the exam cycle, but certainly colleges are much more brand aware and operating kind of on a business model. So for example, our college has a business development team, so they're specifically working with employers and working with them year on year to scope new leads and identify areas of growth, something as a schools would never have really the time or the manpower to do. The colleges will definitely involve employers in other events such as award ceremonies. Again, that's quite common to have those kind of sponsorship opportunities, which again, schools possibly won't do. I mean, this is very generic talking, but and finally, our college has said the key difference to them for 2020 has been that they have shifted from kind of you adapt to us to now we adapt to you. They're kind of being sensitive to obviously the current climate and the pressures on businesses. So yeah, I think the models are quite different, and I think flexibility and accessibility are kind of the two key points. And Jodie may agree or have more to add.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the flexibility in school is less than because of, as you said, of timetable constraints and exam cycles and all those kind of other things. So I think making it sounds very demanding, but making sure that your service is available during the specific weeks for work experience week that have been identified by the schools, for example, would be the best time to engage with students that you're hoping to kind of tap into to look at as apprentices. Whereas the colleges, because they're on different timetables for different subjects, they're more industry specific, so you could just engage with a smaller cohort of students. There's lots of different kind of ways that you could approach the colleges, and as Claire said, they've got specific teams that can kind of handle that. So I'd say there's some key differences to be aware of, but certainly as a school as well, we are much more, we're thinking a lot about your needs as businesses as well, which is why we're actually looking at virtual work experience. Our work experience week isn't until June next year, but we're already thinking, okay, can we actually ask employers in this time to commit to taking on a student in 7 months' time that we're not sure what the situation is going to be and things like that. So we're really thinking about how we can still allow students to engage with employers, get an insight into the world of work, explore different careers, but completely understanding that businesses have got some really key priorities as well that they need to make sure that they're kind of covering too. And I would hope colleges would be the same, but yeah, it's a different approach, and agreeing again with Claire, is colleges are a little bit more corporate, a little bit more business-like, so you might find kind of differing responses and things.
Perfect, thank you. And we've done excellent in terms of timing, so thank you so much for that on that last question. And we will go, I see some questions coming in, so we will look at Q&A or any questions from you guys in a second. But just to say that we will pop our emails up at the end of the session if you did want to find out any more about any of the topics that we've discussed. I mentioned MyKindaFuture and Connector in terms of work experience, so you can go and talk to one of my colleagues in the booth as well, or feel free to email us. But Stephen, yeah, do you know if there's any questions that have come in?
That was great, thanks. That was a really informative session and giving us really good insights into I took away just what's really works on the ground, you know, what works for teachers, what works for students, because I think that's a lot of the that's a lot of the challenge here, I guess, for lots of employers, the schools market is still relatively new compared to how they know how to deal with university. So so we've got a bunch of questions come through, and I think a few of them have sort of been touched on already. If I can start off with what's top of the list at the moment. So pre-recorded video to a teacher for tutor time. What would you do to follow up? How do you ask the students questions? Do people want to follow up? Do these things have a sort of a bit of a longer term life?
Yeah. So Jodie, you go.
Okay. So yeah, we actually have a dedicated tutor time for careers on a Thursday. So the students are used to doing careers related activities every Thursday. So it might be that I play them a video from an alumni talking about their career and what they've gone on to do. It might be a local employer that's talking about their kind of industry in general. But we also have some careers workbooks that they work through. So as a follow-up to the videos or what they might have watched, they have these workbooks that they work through kind of at their own pace during these Thursday tutor times as well. But we also say to tutors, you know, follow this up with maybe a couple of questions and just use them as a discussion point. So, you know, where do you see yourself in 10 years time? Or, you know, what do you think about this career? Where do you think you could do this career in the UK? Anything like that. So just to make sure that it's not just kind of watched and then forgotten about, it's discussed and built upon, and that doesn't have to take loads of time, and it can just be in a tutor session, but I think it really helps, certainly for us, and I'm not sure whether other schools kind of mirror this model or whether they could, but to have that built-in time, dedicated careers time where they know they're going to be talking about careers and looking into careers is really helpful.
Yeah, we had a kind of tangible example. We worked with some local architects who did a 10-minute introduction. And again, never underestimate the ordinary. So they simply talked about their typical day, what it involved. They then encouraged pupils to download a CAD app, and pupils then had an opportunity to do a design task to design whatever it was. There were different types of buildings, and then they were submitted, and then an award was given. So that kind of was the follow-on to the kind of 10-15 minute session that happened in the assembly.
I think that's a really nice example, the idea that students can watch that video and go away and complete an activity, which then comes full circle back to the employer for them to look at. So we do a lot of those sorts of online challenges. You could also follow it up with some digital mentoring that we do on Connector, so that way you get that two-way engagement and students can answer questions following the video. So that is another way, but it's a really good question, because I know it's something that in terms of me trying to balance the needs of clients and employers, and then also what works for the school. I know it's something that works really well with schools, but I know some employers can be hesitant because sometimes it can be challenging to get that ROI. But for us, we really utilise people like Claire and Jodie who are on the ground to give that feedback of how many students have watched this video, how many students have engaged, and getting that feedback through the staff and career leads, and we kind of do it that way.
Got it. And there's a question here that I think I know the answer to from what you said actually, which is around that careers time in the curriculum that you mentioned, Jodie. I mean, is it totally different for every school? Every school will think about different ways of doing this, sometimes in a particular class area like PSHE or something, sometimes extracurricular. I don't know, is there any way for employers to think about this a bit more generically, or has it got to be school by school?
It kind of is school by school, because I mean, even within our trust, we have these careers tutor times. One of our other schools doesn't. They do it in PSHE, like you said. So it really does differ depending on the school. But I think the important thing that we touched on is making them short and snappy so that they can then be delivered, whether they're in a tutor time for 10, 15 minutes, or whether they're in a PSHE lesson, which is a perfect opportunity to then play that video and actually build on that throughout the hour with the other tasks that you could then complete in that session, rather than setting them as a homework task or whatever. So I think the concept is the same. It's just making it really adaptable so that there are follow-up tasks for people that need them if they've got the full hour. There are tasks that can be done at home if they need to be done at home instead, and things like that. So it is kind of a school by school basis, but I think generally having short and snappy interactions is the best way forward. Would you agree, Claire?
Yeah, I mean, it's a postcode lottery. Different schools have different approaches. What I would say, a possible avenue to explore is all schools are really keen to develop careers in the curriculum. So each subject to really showcase to pupils, what can I do with geography GCSE or history A level? So if you can do a presentation that relates to subjects that subject teachers can deliver during careers week, for example, then that's something that would be, yeah, definitely well appreciated, kind of linking careers to each curriculum subject.
Yeah, it's really important.
And I've got two questions here that are around when best to engage with year groups. So one person asking about years 12 and 13, then somebody else asking about year 9. Are there different times of year for different year groups that work better or not so well?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can keep in mind that year 11 and year 13, if we perhaps think COVID aside for now, would ordinarily have mock examinations and then real exams. So kind of pre-Christmas and kind of January time are normally mocks. Some schools will go to February, and then obviously the summer term, I think, don't touch them. So I think for year 11, November, October is a good time. For year 10 and year 9, less precious. Year 9 will be taking their options in the spring, late spring. So anything before then is really, really helpful. Yes, in the winter term for year 9 would be really beneficial. Jodie, if your calendar different?
No, we try to see all of our year 11, we don't have a sixth form at our school, but we try to see all of our year 11 students before Christmas, so that they can get their applications in and have kind of some plans in place. They don't have to be concrete plans, but some plans in place, so that they can then concentrate on revision for mocks and GCSEs. With regards to year 9s, we tend to do it again around their options. So we will engage with them kind of January, February time, ready for them to pick their options. But I would always say earlier in the year rather than leaving it till the summer and saying,
I would throw out there the graveyard slot as well, which is the end of the summer term, which is for some staff can be quite a difficult time because, you know, summer holiday mode is there. So actually sometimes that kind of the penultimate week of term, if you can create a really engaging experience for pupils, that could be well received by schools.
And I think we've got time for one more question. And this is quite an interesting question, I think, actually. It's around virtual work experience. So our data shows is what's pretty much common knowledge, of course, is that internship, work placements, etc., you know, they can't happen in the same way as they did pre-COVID. But lots of employers have, you know, put stuff online. But the question here is about actually, would students prefer some form of live workshop project or a more pre-recorded type event that might be a bit more of a skill session driven or presentation of a project? So yeah, live versus virtual for something that's trying to replicate work experience. And any ideas on what students would prefer?
Yeah, so Claire and I we were just listening in on the last session here, and they gave some really key points and some good ideas about a mixture of online and kind of stuff that they can do without actually physically sitting online, because it's a long day to sit online all day long and talk to people and have your camera on and all the rest of it. So I think a mixture is really important, but certainly something that's meaningful and something that's real rather than like a made up task. And I know, even in real work experience, we're all guilty of it sometimes, trying to find things for them to do, but something meaningful that's actually going to give them an insight. And whether that's online or not, I think as long as it's meaningful is fine.
Yeah, and I would just kind of add to that. You talked about skills, Steve, and I think identifying employability skills in whatever you're doing is obviously key to helping them put that on application forms and things going forward.
Fantastic. All right, we'll have to call an end to it there because it's 22. And that's a really great session, as I said. Thank you very much. That was really informative. I think there's lots of really good takeaways there that people have been listening to intently, and I'm sure we'll be putting into practice. And thanks again to MyKindaFuture, both for sponsoring this event and helping pull this session together. So another 10-minute break now. Time to grab a quick coffee, quick comfort break, and we'll see you back in 10 minutes. Thank you very much.